So today we will be introducing genetics and talking about monohybrid crosses. So before we begin, let's discuss a little bit more about genes. So the sequence of nitrogen bases in DNA provides the instructions for making proteins. This is known as the genetic code, and each section of the DNA that is used to make a protein is called a gene. So every bear has a hair color gene, but they do not all have the same version of the gene. So the different versions of genes are called alleles. So here some bears will have the allele for black fur, some will have the allele for brown fur. Each diploid organism has 2 copies of every gene. So the alleles on each chromosome interact with one another in a way that determines how the genes will be expressed. So here we have our chromosomes. Here we have some mice that are gray or white. So dominant alleles are always expressed. These are represented by a capital letter. So those would be our dominant alleles. And we have here 2 capitals gives us gray fur, but also 1 capital and a lowercase gives us gray fur. And just having one of those letters will give us the dominant feature. Then we have recessive alleles. Those are only expressed if both alleles are the recessive version, and they're represented by a lowercase letter. So the only way to get white fur is if that mouse has lowercase g, or both recessive alleles. So homozygous versus heterozygous. So homo means same. Hetero means different, and zygous means joined together. So homozygous means that the same alleles have joined together. Heterozygous means that different alleles have joined together. So organisms that are homozygous will either be homozygous dominant, 2 capital letters, or 2 dominant alleles, or homozygous recessive, 2 lowercase letters, or 2 recessive alleles, and you have to identify which one they are. So homozygous dominant, here we have some examples: capital G, capital G, capital B, capital B, capital W, capital W, capital Y, capital Y. Anytime you have homozygous dominant, or it says homozygous dominant, that means both letters are capitalized. Next we have homozygous recessive. This is lowercase only, so we'll have lowercase, 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 lowercase. And then we have heterozygous. So for heterozygous organisms, they will contain different alleles, 1 dominant and 1 recessive. So we'll have a capital and a lowercase. So capital G, lowercase g. So the combination of alleles is known as the organism's genotype. So here the genotype would be capital G, lowercase g, or the dominant and recessive. There we go. That's the genotype, the letters. The phenotype is actual physical appearance. What trait do we see? So the physical appearance caused by the expression of those alleles. So that would be the gray fur, the white fur would be the phenotype. We can predict the possible genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring that a set of parents might create. And we do this using a tool called a Punnett square. So each box represents a possible combination of alleles that would occur when gamete cells fuse together during sexual reproduction. So here we have our male and our female, and their possible, what they can give to their offspring, and then the possible combinations of the offspring. So there's 3 main ways to report the results of a Punnett square. The first one is using percentages. So like 75% will have gray fur. The reason is we have this offspring with 2 capital G's, this one with 1 capital G, this one with 1 capital G. So 3 of the 4 boxes, 75%, have a capital G, and capital G is a dominant allele, which is a dominant trait, which is gray fur. Or we can do it with fractions. Here, half of the offspring will be heterozygous. Remember, heterozygous means we have a capital and a lowercase. So 2 out of the 4, or half of the boxes, will have capital G, lowercase g. Or we could also do ratios. So the ratio of offspring with gray fur to white fur is 1 to 1 in this case. So for every box that has a capital G or gray fur, we have a box that has a lowercase. 2 lowercase g's or white fur. So it's important to understand that these are not predictions, or that they are predictions and not guarantees. Meaning, just because we have here that half of the offspring will come out with white fur, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to be the case. And in order for these predictions to be, or for you to see them, you would need to have a lot of offspring. Okay, make sure that you wrote everything that was in red and green, and I'll see you tomorrow.